Liu Jiang had been back in New York for less than an hour. The crisp autumn air bit at him, a stark contrast to the perpetual damp chill of London he'd just left behind. Outside the international arrivals terminal at JFK, the city hummed with an aggressive energy he hadn't realized he'd missed. He pulled his thick wool scarf tighter, his face already flushed from the overheated terminal. Quentin was leaning against a black metal barricade, a lazy grin on his face. He watched Leo approach, only straightening to take the handle of his rolling suitcase when Leo was directly in front of him. Quentin remarked on how Leo had finally graced them with his presence. Leo shrugged off his heavy coat, feigning a dramatic interest he didn't feel. He explained, with a theatrical wink, that he'd heard Quentin was playing matchmaker for him and had immediately booked the first flight home. The lie felt thin on his tongue. Quentin, who knew him better than anyone, didn't buy it for a second. As they descended into the cavernous belly of the parking garage, Quentin observed that Leo didn't seem particularly thrilled to be back. Leo immediately countered, insisting that he'd always planned to return after finishing his master's degree. He vaguely alluded to some unfortunate business that had kept him in the UK for an extra 2 years. The specifics of that business hung unspoken between them, a topic both knew better than to broach directly. Quentin, sensing the mood shift, changed the subject. He asked if Leo wanted to head straight home to wrestle with his jet lag or crash at his place upstate for a few days. Leo didn't hesitate. His father was on a business trip in Asia, so he told Quentin he would be his problem for the foreseeable future. He then added, a genuine look of distress clouding his features, that if the plan was to meet this mystery man immediately, he'd have to pass. He complained about his flight-rumpled state, having not showered and his hair being a mess. Quentin shot him a dismissive glance, scoffing at the idea that the world revolved around Leo's schedule. He assured him that even if Leo was available, the other guy likely had his own life. This piqued Leo's curiosity, and he asked just who this important person was. They stopped in front of a gleaming black Mercedes G-Wagon. As Quentin heaved the luggage into the trunk, he casually mentioned the name Julian Vance. Leo slid into the passenger seat, buckling his seatbelt. He recognized the name as Quentin's notoriously well-connected college roommate, the one with an almost mythical family background. Quentin confirmed this as he skillfully navigated the SUV out of the parking space. He explained that Julian had provided all the initial connections and clientele for the luxury resort he now owned, introducing him to a circle of wealthy and influential people. Leo looked at him, surprised, letting the implication hang in the air. Quentin picked it up seamlessly, clarifying that the man he was being introduced to was one of Julian's friends. Leo leaned back, a sardonic smile playing on his lips. He joked that he was about to be the new money crow trying to fly with the old money swans. Quentin chuckled, correcting his phrasing. After 6 years abroad, had his English gotten rusty? Leo insisted his metaphor was accurate. His father, despite providing him with a comfortable life and an overseas education, was a real estate developer who'd hit the jackpot on one massive, controversial project. A classic rags-to-riches story that put them worlds away from the inherited fortunes of Julian's crowd. 2 hours later, Leo was submerged to his neck in the steaming water of a private hot tub at Quentin's mountain resort in the Catskills. The air smelled of pine and cold stone. Quentin entered, phone in hand. Leo looked up, a hesitant expression on his face. Quentin asked what was wrong. Sinking lower against the smooth rock wall, Leo admitted he wanted to call off the blind date. He sighed, explaining that his ex had been a scholarship student who worked 3 jobs to get by. The thought of suddenly trying to date some trust fund kid felt jarring and insincere. Quentin informed him it was too late. He crouched by the edge of the tub, revealing that Julian had just called. He and his friends were on their way to the resort for a couple of days. Leo asked if they were coming tomorrow. Quentin shook his head. They would be there that afternoon. When Julian's party arrived, Leo was sitting in the resort's minimalist cafe, nursing a cup of black coffee. Soft indie music drifted through the space, and golden afternoon light slanted across the empty tables. He commented to Quentin that business seemed slow. Quentin ignored him, getting up to greet his friends. Left alone, Leo quickly grew restless and slipped out of the cafe to wander the grounds. The resort, which had felt intimate from his private tub, now revealed its immense scale. Aside from uniformed staff, the place was eerily deserted. He was standing by the entrance to a sprawling organic garden when his phone rang. Finding a large, sun-warmed boulder, he sat and pulled it from his pocket. The cheerful ringtone contrasted sharply with the photo on his lock screen, a candid shot of a man smiling. Leo's gaze lingered on it for a long moment before he finally looked at the caller ID. The number was from the UK. He answered in English, addressing his former professor. The woman's voice on the other end was bright as she asked if he was back in the States. He confirmed that he was, but before he could ask why she was calling, a shadow fell over him. A voice from above inquired why someone was just sitting there. Leo looked up to see a group of men had stopped in front of him. The man at the forefront had sharp, handsome features and was impeccably dressed. Leo studied his face for a few seconds, recognizing him from photos Quentin had posted online. This had to be Julian Vance. He stood up, instinctively taking a step forward. His professor was still talking in his ear, asking if he was there. Leo mumbled an affirmative into the phone, his attention snagged by the sight of Quentin walking over with another man. Leo's eyes fixed on the man beside Quentin, and he blinked slowly, the world narrowing to that single figure. He asked his professor to repeat what she had just said. The man's features sharpened into focus. It was an invasive, arresting kind of beauty. His eyes and the bridge of his nose were more deeply set than Julian's. His pupils the color of warm, translucent amber. He was clearly of mixed heritage. His professor's voice came through the phone again, informing him that she had a lead on Chris. Leo's phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the stone path. Later, Quentin had a poker game going in one of the private lounges. It was a high-stakes table, filled with young men who clearly didn't need to check their bank balances. Leo, who didn't play, sat at a nearby table with a cup of tea, watching. The man with the amber eyes, a cigarette held loosely between his lips, played with a lethal calm, his chip stack growing steadily. Quentin, having known Leo for 2 decades, knew exactly what he was thinking. Without looking up from his hand, he informed Leo that the man he was supposed to meet wasn't him. It was the one next to him. Leo said nothing, merely asking for his name. Quentin told him it was Silas Thorne. Leo clarified that he wasn't asking about his potential date. He wanted to know the name of the man next to his potential date. Quentin looked at him, exasperated. Leo pressed, pointing out that Quentin and his friends had obviously booked the entire resort and lied about it being a spontaneous trip. He wasn't even mad about that, so the least Quentin could do was give him a name. After a moment, Quentin relented, telling him the man's name was Caleb. Leo processed this, then recalled Quentin's earlier words about him not wanting to date a rich man. He took a long sip of his tea, admitting that he had said that. But, he added, watching Caleb play was unexpectedly captivating. Far more so than his broke ex-boyfriend had ever been. He had changed his mind. Quentin snorted, asking if he hadn't already been a lost cause from the moment he first laid eyes on the man. Partway through the game, Julian got up to take a call, asking Quentin to play his hand. Leo grabbed a stool and sat next to Quentin, shamelessly offering to help him read the table. Across from them, Silas Thorne looked over, a spark of amusement in his eyes. He addressed Leo by a cloyingly sweet nickname, asking him to come give him some pointers. Leo didn't bother questioning how Silas already knew his name, despite them having barely spoken. The familiarity felt jarring, like they were years into a relationship. He slowly moved to sit in the empty chair between the man with the cigarette and Silas. He glanced at Silas's cards and honestly told him he couldn't make sense of them. Silas abruptly turned to him, a playful, almost seductive look in his eyes. He suggested that Leo should look at Caleb's hand instead and secretly report back. So his name was Caleb. Leo obediently leaned towards Caleb's arm. Caleb, sensing the movement, casually shielded his cards and turned his head. He asked what Leo was looking at, his tone flat and dismissive, like he was scolding a child. Leo just smiled, unfazed, and leaned even closer, his warm breath ghosting across the side of Caleb's neck as he spoke. He asked if Caleb was of mixed heritage. Caleb gave a non-committal hum of agreement. Leo pressed on, asking which countries. Caleb discarded a card, his voice cool and distant. American and Canadian. Leo made a soft sound of understanding, as if a great mystery had been solved, and leaned back. Caleb lifted his hand to stub out his cigarette in the ashtray, a slight frown creasing his brow. He had just misplayed a card. Dinner was 2 hours later. Someone knocked on Leo's door. He paused his game and went to open it. Silas was standing there in a resort bathrobe, leaning against the doorframe. He cheerfully asked if Leo wanted to join him for a soak in the hot tubs. Leo was about to refuse, but then he saw Caleb standing behind Silas, silently smoking, and found himself agreeing. He changed and walked out, pulling his door shut behind him. In front of Caleb, Silas casually slung an arm around Leo's shoulders, though he was speaking to Caleb, suggesting they go to the open-air pools behind the main lodge. Caleb didn't even look at them, his handsome face half hidden in the dim hallway light, and replied with a lazy, indifferent affirmative. The arm on Leo's shoulder tightened. Frowning, Leo glanced at Silas, seeing only the hard, displeased line of his jaw. After a moment of consideration, a spark of amusement lit Leo's eyes, and he raised an eyebrow. In the cold winter night, the natural hot spring steamed, the white vapor making the soft lights overhead appear hazy and dreamlike. A pale yellow moon hung in the sky, surrounded by a scattering of dim stars. Silas sat on a wicker chair, calling the front desk to order some wine. Leo walked over to the rack to hang his clothes. Just as his hand touched the knot of his belt, a tall, imposing figure entered his peripheral vision from the right. Leo's hands paused. He surreptitiously turned his head, his gaze lingering on the man's exposed, powerful chest and lean, defined waist. Caleb walked past him, tossed his robe onto the rack, and his voice, a low and magnetic timbre, carried on the cold night air into Leo's ear. He asked if Leo still wanted his eyes. Leo's stomach tightened. He looked away, finished undressing, and placed his clothes on the rack. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Silas still on the phone. On impulse, he stepped towards Caleb, his toes almost touching the other man's. As he moved past, he let his lips brush against the line of Caleb's jaw and whispered that Caleb's eyes were beautiful. Caleb's hand shot out, his fingers gripping Leo's chin forcefully. His other hand pressed against Leo's lower abdomen, just above the waistband of his swim trunks. His eyes narrowed dangerously. He told Leo to watch his mouth and his hands. He was not gay. Leo's eyes curved into crescents as he smiled. He replied that all straight guys said that right before they slept with a man. Just like his damn ex-boyfriend. After drinking some red wine in the hot spring, a faint blush appeared on Leo's cheeks. The cold night wind did nothing to cool the heat in his face. It only seemed to make it burn hotter. Thankfully, he wasn't drunk. Silas and Caleb's rooms were next to each other, while Leo's was at the far end of the hall. As they reached the two adjacent doors, Leo started to raise a hand to say goodnight, but Silas grabbed it. Silas's eyes flickered over Caleb's face before he smiled at Leo, asking him to come to his room to watch a movie. Having figured out Silas's game hours ago, Leo mentally scoffed but politely declined, saying he needed to go shower. Silas's smile didn't falter. He suggested Leo could shower in his room. Thinking of how much money Quentin probably made off these wealthy clients, Leo decided to be agreeable and said yes. In front of Caleb, Silas led him into his room. The moment the door closed, the smile vanished from Silas's face. He coldly left Leo sitting alone and went into the bathroom to shower. Partway through, as if just remembering his guest, he called through the door that if Leo got tired of waiting, he could just go back to his own room. Leo said okay and left without a second's hesitation. As he passed Caleb's room, he paused, then turned back. He raised his hand and knocked 3 times. No one answered. Leo pressed his ear to the thick wood, listening intently. Hearing nothing, he reached for the handle. Turned. The door was unlocked. He hesitated for only a second before composing his expression and walking in. The living area was warmly lit and empty. A white bathrobe, recently worn, was draped crookedly over the arm of the sofa. Leo slipped off his sandals, his bare feet sinking into the plush wool carpet. The bathroom door was closed, and a soft light glowed through the frosted glass. But there was no sound of running water. He took a curious step forward. A moment later, the door was pulled open from the inside, giving him no time to react. Caleb stood there, bare-chested. A pair of black boxer briefs hung loosely on his lean hips, the lines of his abdomen disappearing beneath the waistband. His expression was not friendly. It was cold, almost severe. He asked if Leo's mother had never taught him not to enter other people's rooms without permission. Leo instinctively stepped back. He apologized, explaining that he had knocked but no one had answered. Then he paused, a nonchalant smile spreading across his face. He added that his mother had, in fact, died a long time ago. Caleb, who had started to walk past him, froze. He turned back, his gaze sweeping over Leo, and let the topic drop. He asked what Leo wanted. Leo followed him into the room, his tone earnest. He claimed the shower head in his room was broken, and when he'd called Quentin, he was told maintenance had already gone home for the night. He asked if he could use Caleb's shower. Caleb lit a cigarette, his amber eyes impassively studying Leo from head to toe. A hint of mockery entered his voice. He wondered if, by some strange coincidence, every other showerhead in the entire resort had also broken, leaving only his available. Leo, who had been momentarily mesmerized by the fluid, practiced motion of Caleb lighting the cigarette, snapped back to attention. He hesitated for only a second before saying Caleb's name. Caleb's expression hardened. Leo smoothly finished his sentence, advising him that he should smoke less, as it was bad for his health. Caleb stared for a second, then an impatient look crossed his face. He gestured towards the bathroom and told him to go. Leo happily complied but returned less than 3 seconds later. He looked down at his bare feet, his toes curling unconsciously into the soft carpet. Caleb's gaze followed his, taking in the small, self-conscious gesture. A frown touched Caleb's brow. Leo looked up and asked if he could borrow a pair of slippers. Caleb, his eyes still downcast, stated flatly that he didn't have any extra slippers. Leo glanced at the pair on Caleb's feet and asked if he could borrow those. Without looking up, Caleb refused, saying he didn't like to wear shoes that other people had worn. Leo said nothing, his toes digging deeper into the carpet. A pair of slippers landed on the floor in front of him. Caleb's cold voice followed. If he didn't go now, Caleb was locking the door and going to sleep. Leo slipped his feet into the men's slippers, still warm from their previous owner, and went into the bathroom. 2 seconds later, he heard the soft click of the lock. Caleb finally looked up from wherever his gaze had been fixed. He crushed the half-smoked cigarette into an ashtray with a flicker of annoyance, poured himself a glass of cold water, and turned down the thermostat. Only then did the tense line of his brow relax. Leo rinsed the soap from his body, washed his swim trunks, and hung them on a hook. He turned off the shower, grabbed a clean, folded bathrobe from the shelf, and tied it loosely around his waist before opening the door. Caleb was on the sofa and didn't look up. He told Leo to go back to his own room now that he was finished. Leo slowly walked over and said his name. The man continued scrolling through emails on his phone, ignoring him. Leo leaned closer, bending down until his eyes were level with Caleb's, and patiently said his name again. His hair, undried, was plastered to his forehead, and a drop of water fell from the tip of a strand, landing directly on Caleb's phone screen. Caleb finally looked up, his eyes taking in the wide expanse of skin revealed by Leo's loosely tied robe. He reached for his own damp towel from earlier, tossed it onto Leo's head, and used his other hand to push him back by the collarbone with his phone. He ordered him to tie his robe properly and not to lean so close. Leo obediently stepped back and tightened the belt, then pulled the towel from his head. He asked if he could borrow something. Caleb stood up, his eyes narrowed, and cut him off, his voice laced with exasperation. He asked what Leo wanted to borrow now. A hairdryer? A dry towel? He told him to borrow it and get out. Leo blinked, a slow smile spreading across his face. Underwear. He asked if he could borrow a new pair of underwear. Or, he added with a slight pause, a worn pair would also be fine. 2 minutes later, Leo emerged from the bathroom. Caleb was standing by the window with his back to him on the phone. He was wearing a black tank top, the fabric riding up slightly to reveal the taut lines of his waist. Leo approached silently. In the dim light of the hot tub area, he hadn't noticed, but now he could see the intricate lines of a tattoo partially hidden beneath the tank top, near his shoulder blade. He instinctively reached out. The moment his fingertips brushed against Caleb's back, Caleb ended his call and spun around. He was about to speak sharply when his gaze fell on Leo's bare chest and long, pale legs. His expression faltered, a vein throbbing at his temple. He demanded to know where his bathrobe was. Leo replied distractedly that he'd taken it off. His hand went to the hem of Caleb's tank top, lifting it. A whale, breaching the surface of an ocean, came into view. Leo's eyelids fluttered. He asked when Caleb had gotten a tattoo. Caleb's face darkened with anger. He asked if Leo was deaf. He had already told him he wasn't interested in men. The color of his pupils suddenly deepened, and his words cut off abruptly. Leo parted his lips and leaned forward, pressing a soft kiss to the beautiful whale on Caleb's back. 3 minutes later, Leo was thrown out of the room. He was wearing the white bathrobe again, the belt tied in a ridiculously tight, dead knot that only a straight man could manage. Caleb slammed the door and threw the deadbolt, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. Not long after Leo returned to his room, Quentin called. He asked if Leo had just been kicked out of someone's room. Leo paused, surprised, and asked how he knew. Quentin told him he'd seen it on the security monitors. He asked if Leo was really serious about Caleb. His voice grew stern as he warned Leo that Caleb never, ever slept with men. Leo, sprawled lazily on his bed, stared up at the ceiling and replied in a light, unconcerned tone that it didn't matter. His ex-boyfriend didn't sleep with men either, right up until the night he slept with him. Quentin shot back that was probably why the guy had dumped him. He scoffed, asking why he didn't know that his ex had abandoned his degree from a top university just to get away from him. One day he was in Leo's bed, and the next he had vanished completely. He pointed out that for a poor student with no family connections, a college degree was everything. How was he supposed to make it in America without one? After a moment of silence from Quentin, Leo admitted he was still having people look for him. He had spent 2 years searching, dreaming every night of the moment he'd find him so he could beat the hell out of him. The call that afternoon had been from his professor in the UK. She had news, but Leo closed his eyes. He had turned her down. He didn't need to find him anymore. Quentin's eyes narrowed on the other end of the line. He asked if Leo was using Caleb as a substitute. If he remembered correctly, his ex-boyfriend also had amber-colored eyes. Leo denied it, insisting they were nothing alike. A happy smile touched his lips as he listed the differences. Chris didn't smoke. Caleb was a chimney. Chris didn't gamble. Caleb owned the poker table. Chris worked shifts at a bar every week. Caleb moved in circles of power and wealth. They were completely different. He opened his eyes, a look of faint confusion on his face. They were nothing alike at all. Then he added with a grin that their underwear size, however, was exactly the same.